People have been pretty big on brining turkeys for a very long time. So I thought I would walk you through a simple brine, one I like to do. We've been doing it for several years as a part of our family. I'm also going to try something new this year. I'm going to do a dry brine, which is where you basically rub the turkey with salt and seasonings, let it sit overnight, or up to 4 days, depending on your preference, and then cook it from there. So let's start with the dry brine, or with the wet brine, and go see how that goes. So for the wet brine, we're going to be doing a citrus brine. Simple, easy, always turns out good. I think you'll like it. Obviously on this ingredient list is going to be a turkey, but composing the brine we have 3 gallons of water, raw sugar, salt, whole peppercorns, 1 orange, a lime, and a lemon. For our salt and our sugar, it is 2 cups each, about 2 tablespoons of cracked peppercorn. Let's get them put together. There are a lot of different containers you can use to brine in. I choose a nice white bucket. You can usually get these at most of your hardware stores. A lot of people use them for when they collect maple syrup. That's going to be a different episode. Make sure it says food grade. It has to say food grade. Non-food grade buckets contain chemicals in the plastic that you do not want in your food. So, take your bucket. First, throw in your sugar, salt. Doesn't matter which order on those two. Add your peppercorns. You're going to cut all your fruit in half. Just give it a little squeeze to get a little bit of the juices going. Drop them in. Same thing with the oranges. And your limes. Limes are a little bit harder to squeeze, but we're not super concerned with getting all the juice out. It's going to come out on its own. With all that in there, now you add the water, pouring in from a high height to help mix everything in. I am doing a 2-gallon batch because size of my turkey, that's about what it's going to take. Now a 2-gallon batch of this in a 5-gallon bucket is going to come fairly close to the top. Give everything a stir until you stop feeling anything gritty on the bottom. This is also going to help agitate the skins and everything else. The other reason you want to squeeze the juice out of the fruit, in the act of squeezing you're actually bruising the rind of the orange and you're letting some of those oils out a little early so it gets right into the mixture. So, we have that done. Next step is the turkey. After you have removed all your giblets and your neck and that stupid little thermometer, just lower her in. I usually go neck down. Hold it down until it fills up, and then just make sure it stays underneath. Mostly. Sometimes you'll have to weight it down. This one isn't bad. You can just kind of jam it down there a little bit like so, and it should stay under its own power. And it'll sink as it sits too. So you're going to let this sit overnight in a refrigerator, or if you live in the colder states, you can stick it outside. Some people like to do this in a cooler. You can actually do this with a frozen turkey a couple of days beforehand, and this will help thaw it out. But we have a dry brine to do, so just a quick word on the recipe. If you are using a fully thawed turkey, use half ice for your recipe. Pint to pound is whirled around. For every pint of water you're going to replace, do a pound of ice. This is very important for a fully thawed turkey because your water coming out of the tap is going to be in the 50s even if you use cold water. Putting the ice in there gets it down closer below the 40-degree range, which is safe. If you're using a frozen turkey, don't worry about the ice. That turkey's going to cool down your water pretty quick. But, dry brine. Okay, for the dry brine, 1 teaspoon of salt per pound of the bird. This is a 12-pound bird. I'm going with about a 1/4 cup. Remember, it's 3 teaspoons to a tablespoon, 4 tablespoons to a 1/4 cup. This is barbecue seasoning. This is what I'm putting on this bird today. I only have 1 barbecue seasoning I use. You can make something different for each one of your meats that you do. Beef, pork, chicken. I would not use this on fish. But I find it's easier just to have one that's awesome on everything. So that's what I do. So for a dry brine, you're basically going to take after you dry off your turkey a little bit, again, take out your giblets, set them aside for gravy. You're going to take about a 1/4 of your salt. And you're just going to sprinkle it around inside. It's a little bit of a pain, but it will be worth it in the end. Now for some people this may seem like a lot of salt. Well, most of it cooks out. Doing a dry brine, I would not recommend using a cooking method where this is going to sit in its juices, and check your juices before you try and make gravy out of it. Like I said, this is my first time doing a true dry brine, so I don't know how it's going to go. I don't know how it's going to turn out. Everything I've read has said you want to try and get as much under the skin as possible, but my skin is really on there, and I don't feel like filleting it. The salt will go through the skin if you let it sit overnight. So what does that mean? It means let it sit overnight. Just get that in there. Doesn't seem like a lot of salt, but you got to remember this is going to be soaking in, getting into every little nook and cranny. That's why you have to do this the day before. They said optimal is 4 days before. But a minimum of 24 hours before. Alright, so we've got that on. Now I want to talk about why I measured this out and put in a little cup, and how important these little cups actually are when you're doing cooking. It doesn't have to be this specific type of cup. Have small containers when you're cooking so you can measure things out, or have a separate container so that when you're doing something like a turkey, you don't have to worry as much about cross-contamination. All the dishes go in the dishwasher, get sanitized. You only contaminated what you were using here and not your big container of whatever you're doing. That's why these are so important. It's not just to look fancy, but you can buy some pretty fancy ones. While we're on the topic of important stuff, can we just talk about these for a minute? And how everybody should immediately rip this out of their turkey or whatever they find it in and throw it as far as they can. These things are notoriously off all the time. They don't work. They suck. Go out and get yourself something, a reliable thermometer. There's a lot of them out there. There's a lot of good ones out there. Buy them. Not these, dude. Anyway. I threw it in the sink, by the way. I still have to sanitize my sink. So, we're going to coat this along with the salt with a layer of this barbecue seasoning. And I may have gone a little heavy on the barbecue seasoning. I can make more. So we're just going to coat this turkey. Outside, inside. Just give it a nice crust all around. And as this sits, all these flavors are going to mix and go throughout the turkey. Because first, when you brine a turkey, it's not all about the salt going in. It's about the salt pulling water out of the turkey. And then as the concentration changes, the turkey pulls it back in to try and equalize the concentration of the solutions. And as it pulls that water back in, it brings the salt along for the ride. The salt and any other flavor you have added. So, let's season the inside of our bird here. Oh, actually it looks like I have just the right amount. There are some areas it doesn't really matter if you get any of it on there or not. So not a long video, but an important one. Wet brine, dry brine. Do all these at least the day before. They're not going to get quite 24 hours. However, even doing it this close to when you want to cook them is going to give you a huge difference in flavor on your turkey. You're going to get more of your seasonings deeper inside the turkey than you would with other methods. Both of them should cook up a lot more tender. My wet brine is going to be going into our roasting oven, Nesco, for those from Wisconsin. That's so we can collect juices that come out of it. I've formulated the brine recipe so that those juices aren't too salty. This one is going on a smoker because, well, why not? So it'll be smoked. I might do a video on that. We'll see if I have time. Thanksgiving cooking gets kind of hectic, and I'm not sure if I can set up a camera for it. But I do plan on doing more videos, hopefully in the near future. Let me know what you think about this one. Being my first video, what I did wrong, what I did right. And everybody have yourselves a great Thanksgiving. I think my next video I'm going to do is actually going to be hot cocoa. Not out of the store. Homemade hot cocoa. Bye.